Dr. Charnt, leave those booster files on the desk and step back for us.
These are campus activity accounts. What exactly are you looking into?
Dr. Olivia Trant operated without real oversight for 6 years as principal of Maple-Wright Academy in Nebraska. 178 parents trusted her with their booster funds. Not one person checked.
Payments made from booster funds to 3 outside vendors.
Those vendors supported athletic events and fundraising work.
She would not be returning to the office she had occupied for the last 10 years. By the end of that afternoon, Dr. Olivia Trant would be in the back of a Nebraska State Patrol vehicle. 4 hours later, federal agents would walk out of her house in the Maple-Wright Pines subdivision, carrying 19 boxes of records, 2 laptops, and a fireproof safe she had not been given time to empty. $1.7 million, 3 shell companies, 6 years of invoices for services that were never performed. The principal of Maple-Wright Academy had signed every single payment herself. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. How well do you actually know the person running your child's school? Drop your honest answer in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. We cover the cases the local news mentions once and then forgets about. And I promise you, there is a lot more here than the headlines told you. Olivia Marie Trant was born in February of 1972 in Grand Island, Nebraska, the second of 3 daughters in a household that sat 2 blocks from the elementary school where her mother taught 4th grade. Her father worked as a parts manager for an agricultural equipment dealership on the eastern edge of town and earned a salary that put the family squarely in the lower middle of the Grand Island income range. The Trant home had 2 bookcases in the living room. One was filled with her mother's teaching manuals and curriculum binders. The other was filled with her father's John Deere maintenance literature. Olivia learned to read early, and she learned to read fast. Her elementary school records, later subpoenaed during the investigation, described a child who was, in the words of one of her teachers, quietly competitive and always finished her work first. She was the kind of student who corrected the substitute teacher and was praised for it. By 6th grade, she was tutoring younger children in the school library on Wednesday afternoons. Her mother kept every report card in a manila envelope in the bottom drawer of a hutch in the dining room. Every single one was lined with A's and B's, with a single C in 7th grade physical education that her mother had penciled a small protest beside. She graduated from Grand Island Senior High in 1990. The yearbook listed her as a member of the debate team, the National Honor Society, and the Student Council, where she served as treasurer her senior year. Treasurer. The job that requires you to keep track of other people's money. She took the role seriously enough that one of her advisors wrote her a letter of recommendation describing her as a young woman who understands that trust in institutions begins with trust in the people who manage their accounts. That letter ended up in her undergraduate admissions file at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. She enrolled at UN Kearney that fall on a partial academic scholarship and a Pell Grant. She studied elementary education with a minor in mathematics. Her advisor's notes from her sophomore year described her as detail-oriented, methodical, and unusually focused for someone her age. She worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore for $4.25 an hour. She graduated in May of 1994 with a 381 GPA. Her first teaching job was at Cottonwood Elementary in Hastings, Nebraska, where she taught 5th grade math for 3 years. Her starting salary was $22,400. She married a man named Curtis Trant in the summer of 1996. Curtis was an actuary at a Lincoln insurance firm, 8 years older, settled in his routines, and quietly proud of his wife in the understated way that careful men can be. They moved into a small ranch house on Sycamore Street. There were no children. Olivia had decided early that her career came first, and Curtis accepted that without complaint. In 1998, she enrolled in the master's program in educational leadership at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She drove from Hastings to Lincoln 2 evenings a week for 3 years. She completed her thesis on site-based budgetary autonomy in mid-sized Nebraska school districts, a topic her advisor described as narrower than necessary but executed with admirable precision. That thesis, which sat for 2 decades in the UN Lincoln Library archive, would later be obtained by a forensic accountant and entered into evidence at her trial. The accountant's testimony noted that Trant had identified the exact administrative structure she would later exploit, 20 years before she exploited it. She earned the master's degree in 2001 and took an assistant principal position at Crete Middle School the following year. Her evaluations from that period described her as reliable, consistent, and well-prepared for advancement. She earned her doctorate in education from UN Lincoln in 2008. Her dissertation focused on parent organization fundraising structures and their relationship to campus-level financial autonomy, another document that would later be entered into evidence. In 2013, she applied for and was offered the principalship at Maple-Wright Academy, the flagship K-12 campus of the Maple-Wright Academy District, located in a fast-growing suburban community 32 miles northwest of Lincoln. The district served approximately 4,200 students across 3 campuses, with Maple-Wright Academy itself enrolling close to 2,400. She was 41 years old when she took the job. Her starting principal's salary was $94,200. She and Curtis bought a 4-bedroom house in the Maple-Wright Pines subdivision for $312,000. By every external measure, she had arrived. To understand what happened next, you have to understand how Maple-Wright Academy actually managed money. The Maple-Wright Academy District had a central business office located in a strip mall administrative annex on Highway 6, 2 miles from the academy itself. That office reconciled the district's general fund, the bond fund, the food service fund, and the payroll account. 4 people worked there. Their job was district-level finance. Site-level finance was a different animal entirely. Each campus principal had administrative authority over what the district called campus-level auxiliary accounts. At Maple-Wright Academy, those accounts included the Booster Club Operating Fund, the Athletic Program Fund, the Parent Organization Fundraising Account, and 3 discretionary categorical accounts tied to capital campaigns and event revenue. The combined balance across these accounts at Maple-Wright Academy averaged between $4 million and $8 million at any given time during Trant's tenure. The money was fed by ticket sales from the Academy's football and basketball programs, by concession revenue, by a sustained capital campaign for athletic facility upgrades, and by a parent organization that hosted 3 major fundraising events per year. The district's policy was that site-based fund management was the principal's responsibility. The principal had check-signing authority. The principal approved vendor invoices. The principal signed off on the monthly account summaries that the central business office filed away without review. The dollar threshold above which a second signature was required was set at $25,000 per transaction. As long as a vendor invoice came in below that ceiling, the principal's signature alone was sufficient, effectively self-certifying within the established dollar ranges. The parent booster organization had its own oversight committee, a finance subcommittee, 5 members elected by the booster general membership. Their job was to provide a layer of independent civilian review over the financial activity of the campus's auxiliary accounts. In a healthy structure, that committee would have caught what Olivia Trant was doing within the first 6 months. But the finance subcommittee, by long-standing tradition at Maple-Wright Academy, was chaired by the principal. The principal chaired the committee that was supposed to oversee the principal. The principal prepared the financial summaries the committee reviewed. The principal selected which line items the committee saw and which it did not. The principal had the gavel. The principal had the spreadsheet. The principal had the trust. And no one in the district business office, no one on the school board, and no one in the parent organization ever asked whether that arrangement made any sense at all. That trust was about to be tested. The scheme began in the spring of 2018. Olivia Trant had been principal at Maple-Wright Academy for 5 years. She had a doctorate, a reputation, a salary that had climbed to $108,000, and a husband whose actuarial career was finally producing the kind of household income that made the Maple-Wright Pines mortgage feel like a comfortable obligation rather than a stretch. By every visible metric, the Trants were doing fine. She did it anyway. On March 14, 2018, she paid $187 to a registered agent service called Cornhusker Corporate Services to incorporate a Nebraska limited liability company under the name Athletic Program Coordination Services, LLC. The registered address was a residential property in North Lincoln that she had purchased through Curtis's name 2 years earlier and rented out. 6 weeks later, she incorporated a second LLC through the same agent. This one called Fundraising Strategy Advisors, LLC, registered to an address that mapped to a small storage unit complex where she had a personal lockbox. In November, she incorporated the third, Campus Event Production Support, LLC, registered to a third address she controlled. 3 shell companies, 1 registered agent, 3 addresses that produce no documented business activity, no employees, no phone lines, no websites, no physical offices, no tax filings beyond the bare minimum Nebraska required to keep the entities in good standing. The first invoice was issued in May of 2018. Athletic Program Coordination Services billed Maple-Wright Academy $18,400 for Q1 athletic operations, consulting, and competitive analysis. Trant approved the payment under her site administrator authority. The check was drawn against the Campus Athletic Fund and deposited into a business account at a Lincoln credit union that Trant had opened in the LLC's name. 2 weeks later, $17,800 of that payment was moved from the LLC account to a personal money market account held jointly by Olivia and Curtis Trant. She did it again the next month, and the month after that, and the one after that. The pattern grew. Invoices from the 3 shell companies came in at consistent intervals, staggered to look like the natural cadence of 3 independent service providers. Each invoice fell below the $25,000 threshold that would have required a second signature. Each invoice was approved by Trant herself. Each payment was processed by the district business office as a routine site vendor transaction, indistinguishable from the hundreds of other small-dollar invoices Maple-Wright Academy generated every year for legitimate services. The campus's high event volume and the operational complexity of its athletic program made vendor invoicing of this character look like nothing unusual. She kept her own ledger. Investigators would find it later. A spiral notebook in the bottom drawer of the home office desk, with columns for invoice date, LLC name, amount billed, amount deposited, and a running cumulative total written in her looping handwriting. By the end of 2018, the column totaled $214,000. By the end of 2019, $437,000. By the end of 2020, $701,000. The numbers grew because she let them grow, because no one had stopped her, because no one had even noticed. She suppressed the Booster Club's internal oversight personally. The Finance Subcommittee met 4 times a year. Trant chaired every meeting. She prepared the financial summaries herself. The reports she presented aggregated the shell vendor payments into broader categories. Athletic operations support appeared as a single line item. Fundraising consulting appeared as a single line item. Event production appeared as a single line item. The committee members never saw the individual invoices. They never saw the vendor names. They never saw the addresses. They saw aggregates. They asked few questions because Trant's reports were detailed, organized, and confident, and because she was the principal, and because the school's athletic program was producing championships, and because the Booster Club had never had any reason to distrust her. She made other mistakes. Her household expenditures climbed sharply between 2019 and 2022. A new SUV in 2019, a kitchen remodel in 2020, a pool installation in 2021, a condominium in Scottsdale, Arizona, purchased in early 2022 for $487,000 in cash. Curtis assumed the money came from her father's estate, which had recently settled. Her father's estate had been worth $46,000. By the end of 2023, the spiral notebook in the desk drawer showed a cumulative total of approximately $1,700,000. Olivia Trant was the highest paid embezzler nobody at Maple-Wright Academy had even thought to check on. And no one was checking on her. No one had ever been checking on her. In August of 2023, the Maple-Wright Academy District hired a new business administrator. His name was Russell Yardley, and he came to the district from a county auditor's office in western Iowa. He was 47 years old, professionally cautious, and the kind of finance person who, on his first week in a new job, began reading the previous 5 years of vendor payment files because he wanted to understand the district's spending patterns before he started making any decisions. Yardley's first major initiative was a vendor rationalization audit. The premise was simple. The district was paying invoices to roughly 1,400 distinct vendors across 3 campuses. Yardley wanted to know which of those vendors were active, which were dormant, which were duplicates, and which represented spend categories the district could consolidate for better pricing. It was a routine, unsexy, deeply administrative initiative. It was also exactly the kind of review that the previous business administrator had not conducted in the 11 years he had held the job. Yardley's team built a spreadsheet: vendor name, address, tax ID, total annual payments, years active, service category. They ran the spreadsheet through a basic deduplication query. They sorted it by total payments. They sorted it by address. They sorted it by tax ID. They sorted it by registered agent. That is when he noticed it. 3 of Maple-Wright Academy's top 15 site-level vendors shared the same registered agent service: Cornhusker Corporate Services. The 3 vendors were registered to 3 different addresses, all in the Lincoln metropolitan area, all in residential or quasi-residential zoning. None of them had a website. None of them returned a phone number that connected to a business line. None of them had a recognizable principal officer listed in the basic LexisNexis pool. Yardley's analyst ran on the second afternoon of the review. 3 independent companies operating in 3 different functional categories at a single school campus, all registered through the same registered agent intermediary, all routing to residences. The probability of that happening by accident was approximately 0. Yardley did not say anything to anyone at Maple-Wright Academy. He did not call Trant. He did not raise it at the next administrative meeting. He drove to the Nebraska Secretary of State's office in Lincoln on the morning of October 17, 2023, and pulled the formation documents for all 3 LLCs. The documents listed Cornhusker Corporate Services as the registered agent and listed 3 different members of record. One of the members had used a previous name designation in the filing. That previous name was Olivia Trant. We are heading into the part of the story where everything she built starts to fall apart, and I promise you, the documentary trail on this case is more damning than anything I could narrate. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel does not let stories like this disappear. Subscribe if you haven't, and share this video with one person who would understand exactly what a 6-year run inside a school district like this actually means. Russell Yardley brought his findings to the Maple-Wright Academy District Superintendent on October 20th, 2023. The superintendent listened, looked at the printouts, and called the district's outside legal counsel that same afternoon. By the end of the week, the district had retained Henley Forensic Accounting Group out of Omaha to conduct an independent forensic audit of all site-level vendor activity at Maple-Wright Academy going back to 2017. The forensic accountant assigned to the case was a woman named Margaret Vasquez. She had spent 11 years in the Nebraska State Auditor's office before going private. She had seen this pattern before. She had seen versions of it in 15 school districts across 3 states. She started with the 3 LLCs. There were no project plans, no deliverables, no work product, no emails between Maple-Wright Academy staff and the LLCs documenting the supposed services, no meeting notes, no invoices that referenced specific dates, specific events, specific advisors, or specific work performed. The invoices contained line items like Q3 athletic operations, consulting, and fall fundraising strategy support with dollar amounts and nothing else. 6 years of invoices, hundreds of them. None of them documented anything that anyone had actually done. Vasquez reconstructed the payment history, every check, every wire, every deposit into the LLC's Lincoln Credit Union accounts. Every subsequent transfer out of those accounts into the personal money market account held jointly by Olivia and Curtis Trant. The transfers followed a pattern. Each LLC payment was held for between 10 and 14 days. Then 90 to 95% of the amount was moved out. The remainder that stayed in the LLC accounts was used to pay the registered agent renewals, the credit union account fees, and a handful of small Amazon purchases that appeared to exist solely to make the accounts look operational. Vasquez matched the personal money market deposits to the Trant's lifestyle expenditures. The new SUV, the kitchen remodel, the pool, the Scottsdale condominium, the cash payments on a 2023 Lexus, the four-figure restaurant tabs, the recurring transfers to a separate savings account held in Olivia Trant's name only, which had a balance, at the time of the audit's completion, of $312,000. By December of 2023, Vasquez had produced a 247-page report. The report was given to the Nebraska State Patrol's white-collar crime unit. A search warrant was prepared. A federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Nebraska was briefed on the wire fraud component because the LLC payments had moved through interstate banking infrastructure. The investigation now had a name and a number. It had a target. It had the spiral notebook in the bottom drawer of the home office desk in the Maplewright Pines subdivision, although it did not yet know that the notebook existed. The State Patrol planned the arrest for a Tuesday afternoon. The principal would be in her office. On the afternoon of January 16, 2024, at 2:47 p.m., 2 Nebraska State Patrol investigators and 1 investigator from the Nebraska State Auditor's Office walked through the main entrance of Maplewright Academy. They were dressed in business attire. They signed in at the front desk. They asked the office secretary if Dr. Trant was available. The secretary said yes, the principal was in her office, and would they like her to call ahead? They said no. They would walk back themselves. Trant was at her desk reviewing the spring athletic budget when they entered. She looked up. She recognized that something was wrong before any of them spoke. Investigator Halpern. Dr. Trant, I'm Investigator Bradley Halpern with the Nebraska State Patrol. We need you to come with us. Trant set down her pen. She closed the budget binder in front of her. She looked at the 3 of them for a long moment. Dr. Trant, can you tell me what this is about? Investigator Halpern, we have a warrant for your arrest, ma'am. The charges relate to embezzlement of public funds from the Maplewright Academy Booster Organization and campus auxiliary accounts. There is also a federal wire fraud component being handled separately. She did not speak immediately. Her face went through 3 distinct expressions in the span of about 4 seconds. Then she said, very quietly, Dr. Trant, I understand. Investigator Halpern, are there any items on your person we need to be aware of? Dr. Trant, no. Investigator Halpern, we are going to ask you to stand and place your hands behind your back. She stood. She turned. She did not resist. The handcuffs went on at 2:51 p.m. The secretary in the outer office was crying by the time they walked Trant past the front desk and out the main entrance. At 6:45 p.m. that evening, federal agents executed a search warrant at the residence on Maplewright Pines Drive. They recovered the laptops, the fireproof safe, the bank statements, and the spiral notebook from the bottom drawer of the home office desk. Curtis Trant, who had returned from work an hour earlier and had not yet been told his wife had been arrested, sat on the front porch in the dark and did not say anything to anyone for almost 2 hours. A Lancaster County grand jury indicted Olivia Trant on February 8, 2024. The state charges were embezzlement by a public employee under Nebraska Revised Statute Section 28-1206, theft by deception under Section 28-512, and tampering with records under Section 28-911. The federal indictment, returned by a separate grand jury in the District of Nebraska on February 22nd, charged her with mail fraud and wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Sections 1341 and 1343. Concurrent jurisdiction. The cases would be tried in sequence, with the state prosecution proceeding first. Her defense attorney was a Lincoln criminal defense lawyer named Howard Pence, who had handled 3 previous embezzlement cases in Nebraska State Court and had achieved plea deals in all 3. Trant authorized him to pursue a plea. The Lancaster County Attorney's Office offered her 4 years if she pleaded guilty to a reduced set of state counts and cooperated with the restitution calculation. She rejected the offer. She insisted on trial. Pence later told a colleague, off the record, that she could not accept that her career was actually over. The trial began on September 9, 2024, in Lancaster County District Court, before Judge Patricia Renfro. It lasted 11 days. The state called 23 witnesses. Russell Yardley testified for almost a full day. Margaret Vasquez testified for 2 days. The forensic accountant walked the jury through the spiral notebook page by page. She read the cumulative totals aloud. The jury saw the photographs of the residential addresses where the 3 LLCs were registered. The jury saw the bank records. The jury saw the Scottsdale closing documents. The jury saw the kitchen remodel invoices. The jury saw the boat registration. The jury returned guilty verdicts on every state count on September 25, 2024. Sentencing took place on November 19, 2024. The Maplewright Academy Booster Organization sent 4 members to speak. The parent who chaired the Booster General membership stood at the lectern and spoke directly to Trant. Our community trusted Dr. Trant because she sat in a chair that said we were supposed to trust her, she said. She knew that. She used it. The money she stole was money that parents raised by selling concessions at football games and washing cars in the high school parking lot and running silent auctions in the cafeteria. She stole from children. She stole from a community that had no reason to suspect she would. Judge Renfro addressed Trant directly before pronouncing sentence. Dr. Trant, the judge said, you spent 10 years in a position of singular public trust. You exploited every structural weakness in the institution that hired you. You chaired the committee that was meant to oversee you. You signed your own invoices. You suppressed the disclosure of your own activity. The court does not accept that this was the result of pressure, addiction, or impulse. The court finds that this was deliberate, sustained, and methodical, and that you understood every single day of those 6 years exactly what you were doing. The state sentence was 7 years in the custody of the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, with restitution of $1,700,000 to the Maplewright Academy Booster Organization and the district auxiliary accounts. The federal case was resolved with a concurrent sentence and a separate restitution order that overlapped with the state obligation. Her Nebraska administrative credential was permanently revoked. She was barred for life from public school employment in the state. She was transported to the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women in York, Nebraska on December 2, 2024. The facility houses approximately 290 inmates. Her earliest possible release date is in 2030. She will be 58 years old when she walks out. Curtis Trant filed for divorce in April of 2025.